Kaboom. Guess who stepped in the room? TJ here. Listen, football season is quickly coming to an end right now. Okay, so many of us played in fantasy football. It's kind of like an addiction that we all have, right? And the thing about fantasy football is there are certain people that if you get these guys on your team and you have them, you went on the run, and it probably led you to a championship. So I want to bring up some guys who, if you had them on your fantasy team, there was a good chance that you walked away with the crown. Now, just right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, there's no quarterbacks on the list. I'm not going to abuse them because they're already the top scorers, right? These are people who you might have overlooked or didn't quite realize they were going to be so good. And if you had them, you did well. And these are TJ's top 5 fantasy ballers. Now, coming in at number 5, this guy wasn't a starter for the whole year, fellas, but I'm going to put him in here because if you had Rashaad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks on your team for that playoff run, there's a good chance you rode it the whole way to victory. The guy who won my league, Daniel Acuna, he had Rashaad, and he won the title this year. Rashaad Penny, let me get this right, 481 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns from week 14 to week 17. He's a guy who didn't do much at the beginning of the season, but if you had Rashaad at the end, you probably went pretty far in your playoffs.
Like Daniel Acuna?
Like Daniel Acuna.
No crap normally, right?
He does. I mean, you know, he knows he's a great salesman. He owns a bunch of Jersey Mikes.
Wherever you are,
he does
Daniel
very
Acuna,
well.
you
But,
bastard.
he got very lucky, that guy.
I had Rashaad Penny and almost made the playoffs because of him.
How about that?
I was way down.
All right, now coming in at number 4, Brockman. You better tuck your chain in. You know why? Deebo coming. That's right. Deebo Samuel of the 49ers. He was a GAM, as we like to say around here. Deebo was a grown-ass man.
Yep.
And he, he did it by land. He did it by air. He had 1,400 yards receiving with 6 touchdowns through the air.
And he did it by Seahawk, too,
He did it by sea.
Yes.
365 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns. Plus, Deebo doesn't really shy away from contact either. So he was bodying a whole lot of people out there, Chris. He was putting the pain down on a lot of people. And if you had Deebo, you probably got him a little bit lower in your draft. So he paid dividends for you. So that's why I got Deebo coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, the tight end position is very hard. It's very hard to get, a lot of good production out of your tight end position. And if you had this guy in particular, I'm thinking that you went pretty far, and that's Baltimore Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. We're talking about 107 catches, 1,391 yards, and 9 touchdowns out of Mark Andrews. And like I said, there's only about really 5 tight ends, Chris, that you're going to get a lot of production with. And if you have one of them, you got a good chance to win your league. And if you had Mark Andrews, you should have been one of the last men standing.
The guy in my league had Mark Andrews, won the whole thing.
There you go. Okay, coming in at number 2, this guy, he could have been number 1, but I'm putting him at number 2 just because, I think we kind of knew that he was going to have a good year. Didn't quite know he was going to have this type of year. And that's Jonathan Taylor, the running back out of the Colts. Ever since he called into this show when he was in Wisconsin, I think we all, fell in love with Jonathan Taylor as a person. We all kind of root for him here. Man, 1,811 yards rushing, 40 catches, 360 yards, 20 total touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor was on your team. I'm hoping that you did pretty well.
And number 1 is someone who is not on my fantasy team.
Number 1,
I haven't had anybody that you mentioned.
Number 1 is a guy
in the last 2 minutes.
We do an auction draft in my league, the Franklin Strip Fanatics. It's kind of big boy football. You do an auction instead of like a serpentine draft. And I had my eye on this guy, and he did not disappoint. Cooper Kupp. Got to be the number 1 fantasy baller, simply because I don't know that anyone expected the type of production out of Cooper Kupp that he put out. He had the triple crown in receiving, 145 catches, 1,947 yards, 18 touchdowns. If you were in a PPR league and you got a point per reception and you had Cooper Kupp, you were smashing all types of records. And this was kind of hard, Chris, because there's so many players and there's so many people that really did well. But if you had any one of these guys or multiple players on this list, then you probably did well. And it's TJ's top 5 fantasy ballers.
Well, we did have, well done, sir.
Yeah, dude who won my league had Cooper Kupp and Mark Andrews.
That's my man right there.
One of the guys in my poker league, Rob Moore, had both Kupp and Jonathan Taylor finished fourth.
How?
Well, because week 17, week 16 was an off game for both.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's the semifinals, right? Would have been 17? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he went against like Jamar Chase and a whole bunch of other people. Like, see ya. Out. Like, that's the way these things break, you know? Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.